My name is Rachel Moore. I'm 30 years old, and I've spent most of my adult life trying to be someone my parents could finally see, someone they'd be proud to call their daughter. But tonight, under the soft lights of the Garden Room Bistro in Silvergate, Oregon, I finally let myself believe that none of that mattered anymore. Tonight was supposed to be mine, and no one could take it away, or so I thought. I glanced around the elegant dining room, breathing in the comforting scent of fresh roses and subtle notes of vanilla candles. Every detail was perfect, exactly as Daniel and I had envisioned. We'd chosen soft string lights, gold-rimmed dinnerware, and delicate floral centerpieces that reflected the warm glow of joy filling my heart. Daniel stood beside me, his hand gently resting against my back, a steady reminder of everything good that had come into my life since meeting him 4 years earlier. Tall, calm, and reassuring, Daniel had been my anchor since our first conversation during a film industry mixer. As a commercial film producer, he had a way of capturing life in all its raw authenticity, a skill that had quickly made him the most trustworthy person I'd ever known. Our closest friends, co-workers, and extended family gathered tonight to celebrate our engagement. In just 4 short months, Daniel Reyes would become my husband. As I surveyed the room, smiling faces met mine. Lily Chen, my best friend and maid of honor, winked from a nearby table, and Daniel's parents, always supportive, lifted their glasses in our direction. Yet, as my eyes drifted toward the table where my parents sat, my stomach twisted slightly. My mother, Gloria, offered a smile that seemed tight and forced, her eyes reflecting something more calculating than joyful. Beside her, my father, Peter, stared silently into his glass of wine, avoiding eye contact. Next to them, scrolling absent-mindedly through her phone, was my younger sister, Vanessa. Even at 26, Vanessa behaved like the world owed her something, wearing entitlement like a second skin. She barely acknowledged me, acting as though this night, my engagement, my happiness, was an inconvenience to her. I shook off the familiar sting of disappointment. Tonight wasn't about old grudges or buried resentment. It was about Daniel and me, about moving forward. Suddenly, Gloria stood, lightly tapping her wine glass with a silver spoon. A gentle ringing echoed through the restaurant, silencing conversations and drawing attention to her poised figure at the center table. The guests turned toward her expectantly, and for a moment, I allowed myself to feel hopeful. Maybe tonight would be different. Maybe, finally, she'd say something that healed instead of hurt. "Can I have everyone's attention?" Gloria began, her voice carrying clearly through the hushed room. "First, let me congratulate my beautiful daughter Rachel and her fiancé Daniel. I wish you both a marriage filled with love, joy, and endless happiness." Polite applause rippled through the crowd. Daniel squeezed my hand reassuringly under the table, and I leaned into his touch, grateful. But my mother's next words sliced through the warmth with precision. "However, I have another announcement," Gloria continued, her tone colder, more deliberate. "After careful consideration, Peter and I have decided that the $60,000 we set aside for Rachel's wedding will instead go to her sister Vanessa." An icy silence blanketed the room. I blinked, certain I must have misunderstood. A quiet laugh escaped my lips as I glanced around, expecting someone else to laugh with me at the absurdity. But nobody did. "That's funny, Mom," I said hesitantly, trying to keep my voice light. "But we both know that money is already mine. You can't just give it away." Gloria's eyes hardened, her voice turning sharply dismissive. "This isn't a joke, Rachel. Vanessa is getting married soon after you, and she clearly needs the funds more urgently." Heat rushed to my cheeks as disbelief turned quickly to anger. "Mom, we've been through this. That money was transferred into my personal account years ago. Daniel and I have already budgeted every penny. Our wedding, our future home. You can't just take it back." Vanessa suddenly stood, nearly knocking over her chair as she glared at me across the table. "Stop being so selfish, Rachel," she snapped. You knew I needed help months ago, but you've never once offered to share. I met her gaze head on, my voice steady. I've planned carefully, Vanessa. You had the same amount and blew through it recklessly. I'm not responsible for your bad decisions. Gloria's face flushed crimson with anger. Your sister lives simply, she hissed, her voice quivering with barely contained fury. Her fiancé is struggling to build something for their future. You've always had more. I've always worked harder. I fired back immediately, refusing to shrink under her glare. I planned, saved, and acted responsibly. I'm sorry, but I'm not handing over my future to clean up Vanessa's mess. Gloria stepped forward swiftly, closing the space between us in a heartbeat. Before I realized what was happening, her hand whipped through the air, landing sharply against my cheek. The brutal sound echoed off the restaurant walls, freezing every guest in stunned silence. My head snapped to the side, cheek throbbing, tears stinging the corners of my eyes, not from physical pain alone, but from shock and betrayal. The silence stretched painfully long as I slowly turned my face back to meet her eyes, my voice trembling with emotion, but steady enough to be clear. You don't get to hit me just because I refused you. A sharp intake of breath broke the silence from somewhere nearby. Then a quiet voice behind me, urgent and clear, spoke softly into a phone. Yes, police, please. There's been an assault at the Garden Room Bistro. As distant sirens began to wail toward us, Daniel's grip on my hand tightened protectively. Vanessa's eyes widened for once, registering shock rather than entitlement. My father stood frozen, eyes cast downward, offering no comfort, no defense. Gloria, suddenly pale and shaken, stepped back, realizing too late what she had done. Within minutes, the restaurant doors opened, revealing two uniformed officers scanning the stunned room. The lead officer approached me carefully, his voice gentle, yet professional. Miss, are you the one who was assaulted? I nodded, my voice steady despite the chaos inside. Yes, officer. I was. The quiet murmurs around the restaurant grew, whispers of disbelief mingling with sympathy. The officers turned toward Gloria, who tried to protest weakly, insisting it was just family business. But the law didn't see it that way, not tonight. As the officers escorted Gloria out into the cool evening air, handcuffed and humiliated, I knew this was just the beginning. But for the first time, despite the throbbing in my cheek, I felt something else. A deep, powerful determination. I wouldn't be the silent victim anymore. Tonight, everything had changed. Tonight, I decided to fight back. As the restaurant slowly emptied, Daniel guided me gently toward the exit, his arm wrapped securely around my shoulder, shielding me from curious, sympathetic gazes. We walked quietly into the cool night air, leaving the place that was supposed to mark a joyful beginning, now tainted by humiliation and heartbreak. Later that night, after icing my swollen cheek, I lay awake beside Daniel, my mind replaying the painful scene over and over. This betrayal wasn't new. It was simply a darker, more visible eruption of a family dynamic I'd always tried to ignore. My mother, Gloria Moore, had always been fiercely protective, but only of Vanessa. Vanessa was 4 years younger than me, the eternal baby of the family. Ever since we were children, she could do no wrong in my parents' eyes. Even when her choices cost everyone dearly, they rushed to shield her from consequences. At 17, my parents established separate funds for both of us, $60,000 each, intended to support our education and life goals. But while I viewed mine as a precious foundation to carefully build upon, Vanessa saw hers as endless fuel for impulsive desires. I remembered the day clearly when I gained full control of my fund at 19. I was cautious, investing wisely and preserving the majority for major life milestones, determined never to rely solely on others. After attending a public university on a partial scholarship, I allowed the fund to quietly grow, always mindful of the future. Vanessa took a different path. She chose an expensive private university, not for academic rigor, but for its glamorous image. Less than 3 years later, she dropped out, bored and restless. Instead of reevaluating, Vanessa plunged her remaining funds into an ill-advised boutique startup. She hosted extravagant launch parties, paid for influencers, and spent lavishly on branding without any clear business plan. Predictably, it failed spectacularly, leaving her nothing but debt and an expensive car, a bitter reminder of wasted potential. Yet, my parents never blamed Vanessa. Instead, they praised her courage and ambition, offering endless emotional and financial support while quietly resenting me for my stability and success. I could still hear Gloria's words clearly. Vanessa needs guidance and love, Rachel. You never needed anything. I brushed away a tear, feeling Daniel's comforting presence beside me in bed. You awake? He murmured softly. Yeah, I whispered back, just thinking. Want to talk about it? I sighed deeply, turning toward him, finding reassurance in his steady eyes. It's just, I don't understand why they resent me so much for being responsible. It's like they think I'm heartless because I don't break down, don't ask them for anything. Daniel gently touched my cheek, his fingertips tracing the edges of my bruise. You're strong, Rachel. They fear that strength because they can't control it. His words settled somewhere deep within me, bringing clarity. Maybe Daniel was right. Maybe this resentment wasn't about money or Vanessa's mistakes. Maybe it was about control, about my unwillingness to bend to their expectations. A few weeks passed quietly, but the tension never eased. Gloria had been released on bail, but there had been no apologies or efforts to reconcile. My father, Peter, remained stubbornly silent, refusing to take sides, or rather, silently choosing Vanessa by default. Then, one afternoon, as I returned from work, I saw an envelope in my mailbox, marked with a stern-looking logo, Holland and Sutter Associates, attorneys at law. My hands trembled as I tore it open, reading the words with growing disbelief. My own parents were suing me for control of the $60,000 that legally belonged to me. At first, the lawsuit felt absurd, laughable even. But beneath the absurdity lay a bitter truth. They would rather drag me through court than admit Vanessa had failed. It wasn't about justice. It was about pride, favoritism, and control. Determined to protect what was rightfully mine, I immediately contacted a sharp attorney named Tasha Green. Tasha had an imposing reputation in Silvergate for fighting fiercely for her clients. During our first meeting, she carefully reviewed my financial documents before confidently setting them aside. They have nothing, Rachel, she said calmly. This money was gifted to you with no restrictions. Their lawsuit is intimidation, pure and simple. Then why bother with all this? I asked, frustration bleeding into my voice. Tasha looked at me knowingly. Because when control fails, manipulation begins. They're hoping you'll fold under pressure. The first preliminary hearing was painful, but clarifying. Vanessa stood smugly, confidently presenting a narrative in which I had betrayed the family by hoarding funds meant to support education alone. But Tasha was prepared. Calmly, firmly, she questioned Vanessa about her own spending habits. Miss Moore, Tasha began, her voice measured. Is it true you used the majority of your fund for purposes other than education? Vanessa hesitated, eyes narrowing in irritation. Not all of it. In fact, Tasha pressed, you dropped out of college after 2.5 years and poured the rest into a boutique business and a luxury vehicle, correct? Vanessa looked cornered. That's irrelevant, she snapped. On the contrary, Tasha responded calmly, turning toward the judge. It demonstrates clearly there were no strict conditions placed on these funds. The only difference is Rachel was responsible and Vanessa wasn't. The judge raised an eyebrow thoughtfully, jotting down notes as the courtroom grew quiet. My parents exchanged tense glances, visibly uncomfortable. Vanessa sat back, lips pressed tightly together, shooting venomous looks toward me. The hearing ended with no immediate verdict. just a promise that more painful court dates lay ahead. But as I stepped out onto the courthouse steps, Daniel wrapped his arms securely around me, whispering softly, "You were incredible in there." My heart lifted slightly. For the first time, standing my ground felt empowering. It wasn't just about money. It was about self-respect, about refusing to shrink into the shadow of my family's favoritism and manipulation. Yet, as Daniel and I walked away from the courthouse together, I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that this fight was far from over. Vanessa wasn't used to losing, and my parents weren't ready to let go of control. I knew them too well. They'd strike back in other ways I wasn't yet prepared for. But whatever lay ahead, one thing had become crystal clear to me: I wouldn't back down. Not this time. Not ever again. In the weeks following that first court appearance, life settled into an uncomfortable rhythm. Each morning, I woke up feeling drained before the day even began. Balancing my demanding job as a UI/UX designer with the constant barrage of legal paperwork was exhausting. Daniel was unwavering, but even his quiet strength couldn't erase the shadow my family cast over our lives. One afternoon, as I reviewed menus and floral arrangements for our wedding, my phone buzzed sharply. My cousin Jenna's name flashed across the screen. Jenna and I hadn't spoken in months, not since the disastrous engagement party. But curiosity outweighed caution. "Hey, Jenna," I answered tentatively, expecting awkward pleasantries. "Rachel," she began slowly, sympathy evident in her tone. "I'm just calling to say, I'm so sorry about your wedding." My pulse quickened in confusion. "Sorry about what?" "Our wedding is still on." There was silence, then hesitant embarrassment in her voice. "Oh God, Rachel, you haven't heard?" My chest tightened painfully. "Heard what?" Jenna exhaled heavily. "Your mom called everyone. She said you and Daniel called it off because he cheated on you." For a moment, my breath froze completely. "What?" "That's insane. There's more," Jenna said regretfully. "She told people you're having some kind of emotional breakdown. Vanessa's been repeating it everywhere too." Shock and betrayal surged through me once again, my fingers trembling as I ended the call. I immediately checked my email, my heart dropping as I saw a series of frantic messages from confused friends and distant relatives. They'd received emails supposedly from me, stating the wedding had been canceled due to Daniel's infidelity. They looked authentic, but they weren't from my account. Someone had meticulously crafted a false narrative to sabotage our happiness. My mind raced. Vanessa! It had to be her. This was more than legal maneuvering. It was personal, malicious. As rage built inside me, Daniel walked into the room, immediately sensing something was wrong. "What happened?" he asked softly, concern etched deeply into his features. I showed him the emails, my voice shaking with anger. Daniel's eyes darkened as he took in the cruel messages. "There's more," he said grimly, pulling out his phone. "Vanessa texted me earlier. She sent these." He showed me a set of photos, poorly edited, obviously fake images, showing my face awkwardly superimposed onto another woman's body, standing intimately close to an unfamiliar man. They were pathetic attempts, yet deeply disturbing. Daniel's jaw clenched tightly. "I didn't believe it for a second, Rachel, but my parents saw them too. Vanessa is trying to poison everyone against you, against us." The depth of her betrayal was staggering. This wasn't impulsive. It was calculated, intentional cruelty. I could understand resentment, jealousy even, but actively sabotaging my relationship crossed every line imaginable. That evening, in a moment of desperate clarity, I called Aunt Darlene, my mother's younger sister, one of the few family members who had never fully taken sides. She answered softly, as though expecting my call. "Rachel, I'm so sorry." "Aunt Darlene," I whispered, voice cracking under the weight of hurt. "Why are they doing this?" She sighed deeply, sadness evident in every word. "Because your mother always puts Vanessa's happiness first, even if it means destroying yours." She's convinced herself Vanessa is the victim. And you? Well, you're the easiest one to blame. The truth hurt more coming from someone who understood. I swallowed hard, blinking away tears I refused to let fall. I'm tired of being their scapegoat, I finally managed to say, my voice steadier now. I won't let them destroy my life anymore. Then don't, Aunt Darlene urged gently. Stand firm, Rachel. Protect what's yours, your relationship, your integrity, your future. Inspired by her words, Daniel and I spent the following days taking concrete measures. We secured our online accounts, sent messages correcting the lies, and carefully explained the truth to trusted friends and family. Yet, despite our efforts, the damage had already been done. Some people would always doubt us, whispers lingering in the background, making the wedding preparations feel hollow. With the ceremony approaching, Daniel and I decided we couldn't leave anything to chance. We hired security for our wedding day, giving them explicit instructions. Under no circumstances were Gloria, Peter, or Vanessa allowed on the premises. It hurt deeply erecting these barriers against my own family, but it was necessary. They'd proven beyond a doubt they were capable of anything. As Daniel finalized plans with the security team, I sat alone one night, staring at my reflection in the mirror. My eyes seemed darker, older somehow. This experience had changed me, but perhaps in a necessary way. I'd spent my life trying to earn their approval, chasing love I was never meant to receive. Now, standing firmly in my own truth, I felt a strength I'd never known. I was no longer Rachel, the obedient daughter desperately hoping for acceptance. I was Rachel, the woman who knew exactly who she was, refusing to be silenced or shamed. The eve of our wedding arrived quicker than expected. Daniel and I shared a quiet dinner, promising each other we'd never allow outside forces, especially my family, to define our happiness again. That night, lying awake beside him, I realized something profound. My family believed love was conditional, that acceptance had a price. But real love was unconditional. Daniel had taught me that. Tomorrow, when I walked down that aisle without my parents, without my sister, I'd do so proudly, understanding deeply that I wasn't losing family. I was finally discovering what family truly meant. Yet, even with that quiet strength within me, nothing could have prepared me for what Vanessa would attempt next on my wedding day itself. My wedding morning arrived cloaked in an uneasy quiet. The sun broke gently over Hollow Creek vineyards, bathing the rolling green hills in soft golden light. The scene was exactly as Daniel and I envisioned, a picturesque outdoor ceremony under a delicate floral archway, rows of white chairs awaiting our loved ones. Yet, beneath the beautiful setting lurked tension and apprehension I couldn't fully shake. In the bridal suite, Lily helped me into my gown, her gentle chatter doing little to soothe my nerves. She smoothed my veil, smiling reassuringly. Rachel, don't let them steal this from you. Today belongs to you and Daniel. I nodded silently, my heart still burdened by thoughts of my family's betrayal. How far would Vanessa go? Would my parents respect our boundaries, or would they again attempt to sabotage our happiness? As guests began arriving, the soft hum of conversations drifted toward us, mixing with the faint melodies from the string quartet playing in the distance. Lily excused herself briefly, leaving me alone to take a deep breath, hoping to steady my trembling hands. Then came a quiet knock at the suite door. I turned to see one of our hired security guards standing respectfully in the doorway. His expression was carefully neutral, but his tone hinted at something serious. Miss Moore, he began cautiously, we've intercepted someone attempting to enter through a rear service gate. My pulse quickened, dread settling deep within me. Who was it? He hesitated slightly before answering. It was your sister, Vanessa Moore. My heart sank. Even today, especially today, she couldn't resist. Was she alone? Yes, he replied carefully, but we checked her belongings. She had a large can of red paint concealed in a tote bag. The air caught sharply in my throat. Red paint. to ruin my dress, the venue, everything we'd planned meticulously. Fury warred with grief inside me. The betrayal cut deeper than I'd imagined. "Would you like us to involve local authorities?" the guard asked calmly. "We can press charges immediately." For a long moment, I considered it. The thought of Vanessa facing legal consequences for her cruelty was tempting. But I remembered something Tasha had told me weeks earlier. Not every battle needs to be fought publicly. Sometimes the strongest victory is simply moving forward without them. I finally shook my head slowly. "No, don't involve the police. Just remove her from the property and ensure she doesn't return. And double check for my parents. They might still try something." He nodded respectfully, leaving quietly. I sank onto a nearby chair, struggling to contain my emotions. Lily returned moments later, instantly sensing my distress. "Rachel?" Her voice was gentle but urgent. "What happened?" "Vanessa," I whispered bitterly. "She tried to sabotage everything again. Red paint, Lily. She wanted to ruin my dress, my wedding, our entire day." Lily knelt beside me, squeezing my hand comfortingly. "But she failed. Today is yours, Rachel. Don't let her steal even one more moment." Taking her words to heart, I stood, taking a deep breath, forcing the anger and pain back. Today was about Daniel and me, our love, our commitment, our future. I wouldn't let Vanessa's spite overshadow our joy. Moments later, my uncle, my father's younger brother, who had long disapproved of my parents' unfair treatment of me, arrived quietly to walk me down the aisle. Seeing him standing proudly at my side eased some of my sadness. As we stepped into the sunlight, I felt strength return to my heart, knowing true family wasn't always determined by blood, but by genuine love and support. Guests turned to face me, their smiles warm and sincere. At the end of the aisle stood Daniel, his eyes locked onto mine, radiating calm strength and deep love. Every step closer felt like leaving behind the bitterness, shedding the weight of betrayal with each measured stride. We exchanged vows beneath the floral arch, speaking of loyalty, respect, and unconditional love, words carrying even deeper meaning given everything we'd overcome together. As Daniel slipped the ring onto my finger, I felt the profound truth of the moment. I wasn't alone anymore. I had him, and together we could face anything. When the officiant declared us husband and wife, cheers erupted warmly around us. Genuine love and happiness flowed freely, a stark contrast to the cold bitterness that had marred the past few months. During the reception, guests danced and laughed, seemingly oblivious to the turmoil we'd endured. At one point, my Aunt Darlene approached, her embrace tight and meaningful. "I'm proud of you, Rachel," she whispered. "You stood your ground, and now you're free." Her words lingered long after the final toast had been made. As the evening drew to a close, Daniel and I slipped away quietly under the velvet sky. Rice scattered joyfully around us, thrown by friends who genuinely wished us happiness. Sitting in the car, Daniel took my hand, his eyes soft and sincere. "We made it," he said gently. I nodded, smiling softly for the first time in weeks. We did. Yet, even as we drove away, leaving the vineyard behind, I couldn't escape the reality that my family still hadn't learned. Vanessa's wedding was soon approaching, and I'd heard whispers already about extravagant plans, funded by debts my parents could barely afford. I wondered briefly if they'd ever recognize their own mistakes, or if pride would blind them forever. But tonight, those thoughts didn't matter. Tonight belonged solely to us. Little did I know, my family's desperate attempt to preserve Vanessa's image would soon backfire spectacularly, exposing truths they could no longer hide, and finally giving me the justice I so deeply deserved. Weeks after our wedding, Daniel and I settled into a small but charming apartment just outside Silvergate. With careful budgeting, the remainder of my wedding fund became a comfortable down payment, finally giving us a place we could truly call our own. It was modest, but it was ours, built from determination, planning, and resilience. Life slowly began to return to normal. Yet the shadow of family conflict lingered. The bitterness hadn't faded, and the ache of betrayal still caught me off guard, especially during quiet moments. Holidays came and went without a single message from my parents or Vanessa. At first, their silence stung, reopening wounds I thought had healed. But gradually, a sense of peace began to replace the pain. One afternoon, while picking up groceries at a local market, I heard a familiar voice calling my name. Turning around, I saw my cousin Natalie waving warmly from across the aisle. I smiled, feeling a genuine warmth I hadn't felt from family in months. After a quick hug, Natalie hesitated briefly before saying, "Rachel, have you heard about Vanessa's wedding?" A wry smile tugged at my lips. "We haven't exactly been in touch." She lowered her voice, glancing around discreetly. "It's turned into a spectacle. Your parents took out a huge loan. It's at the Grand Oak Estate, downtown. Super lavish, gourmet chefs, designer dresses, champagne fountains. They're trying to make a point, I guess." I felt a brief pang of sadness, not envy, but disappointment that my parents were still blind to reality. Natalie continued quietly, "But here's the thing, not everyone is going. Quite a few family members declined the invitation after what they did to you. It's like people are finally seeing who Vanessa really is." For a moment, I felt vindicated, but then sadness settled back in. My parents were risking their financial security and reputation, all to perpetuate Vanessa's illusion of perfection. "They can't afford it," I murmured softly, almost to myself. "And Vanessa will never be grateful." Natalie squeezed my arm gently. "Rachel, you've done everything right. You were strong when most people would have broken. Whatever happens next isn't your responsibility." Her words stayed with me long after we parted ways. She was right. This was a path my parents chose willingly. Yet, watching their decisions spiral out of control was still deeply unsettling. 2 weeks later, Vanessa's extravagant wedding made headlines, but not in the way my parents had hoped. Photos appeared online, grand decor, expensive gowns, and over-the-top details. But what captured the public's attention wasn't the lavishness. It was the news of financial trouble surrounding it. A prominent local blogger reported my parents had leveraged their home to fund Vanessa's big day. It became painfully clear they'd sacrificed everything for one moment of vanity. The gossip was relentless, whispers spreading quickly through Silvergate's close-knit community. Then, as if fate itself had intervened, I received an unexpected phone call one evening. It was Aunt Darlene, her voice heavy with regret. "Rachel, your parents have lost the house." I sat down slowly, absorbing her words. "They couldn't keep up with the payments," she explained, voice strained. "The bank foreclosed. They're staying with Vanessa temporarily, but things are tense." I felt no satisfaction, only deep sadness. Their pride had cost them everything. Vanessa, predictably, blamed everyone but herself, refusing to acknowledge her role in their financial ruin. Daniel watched me quietly after I ended the call, his expression gentle but guarded. "You okay?" I sighed deeply. "I don't even know. Part of me feels sorry for them. Another part wonders why I should care when they brought it all upon themselves." He moved closer, wrapping his arms around me comfortingly. "Because you're compassionate, Rachel, even when others don't deserve it. That's why you're different from them." In his words, I finally found clarity. My compassion didn't mean weakness, it meant strength. I could acknowledge their pain without making it mine to carry. Yet, as the news spread further, Vanessa did exactly what I'd anticipated. Instead of taking responsibility, she shifted blame, painting herself as a victim yet again. But this time, fewer people listened. The damage was too clear, too severe. Friends distanced themselves, relatives expressed quiet disappointment, and Vanessa found herself isolated, forced to reckon with the truth she had long denied. One evening, months later, while Daniel and I were preparing dinner, there was a quiet knock at our door. Opening it, I froze in surprise. My father stood there, older somehow, eyes tired and hollow. It was the first time he'd reached out since the engagement party. "Rachel," he said hesitantly, voice low and filled with regret. "Can we talk?" I considered turning him away. I owed him nothing. But instead, I opened the door wider, inviting him in with a simple nod. Daniel quietly stepped aside, giving us space. My father sat heavily on the couch, eyes fixed downward. Finally, he spoke quietly, almost whispering, "I'm sorry, Rachel. We made mistakes, huge mistakes. We lost sight of what mattered. Your mother still won't admit it, and Vanessa, well, you know Vanessa. But I'm sorry. For everything." Emotion flooded me, and tears stung my eyes, not because his apology made everything better, but because it finally acknowledged the truth I'd always known. "I appreciate you saying that," I replied carefully, "but you have to understand, words alone can't heal this." He nodded slowly, understanding. "I know. I'm not asking you to forgive immediately. I'm just asking for a chance to prove I've changed." We sat in silence for a moment before he stood, promising quietly he'd keep in touch. As he left, Daniel returned, squeezing my hand supportively. "You okay?" I looked into his eyes, smiling softly. For the first time, I think I might be. That night, as I stood on our balcony overlooking the city lights, I realized something profound. My parents' favoritism hadn't just hurt me. It had ultimately destroyed their family, their security, and their happiness. Vanessa's entitlement had been encouraged to the point of ruin. Yet, through the pain, I'd found clarity and peace. The $60,000 wedding fund hadn't merely bought us a home. It had secured our freedom. Freedom from manipulation, guilt, and toxic family dynamics. Freedom to build a life based on genuine love, respect, and mutual support. I turned back inside, where Daniel waited quietly, his eyes gentle and patient. Stepping into his arms, I finally let go of the last threads of hurt that bound me to the past. Because now, more clearly than ever before, I understood exactly what real family meant. And it had nothing to do with blood. It had everything to do with love. In the months following my father's visit, I cautiously allowed him back into my life, slowly and only on my terms. We met occasionally for coffee or dinner, each conversation careful and guarded at first. But gradually, the awkwardness softened into something genuine. He showed sincere remorse, often admitting quietly how he'd allowed Gloria's favoritism toward Vanessa to dictate our family's dynamics for far too long. One afternoon, over coffee at a small cafe downtown, he finally shared a painful truth. "Rachel," he began hesitantly, staring into his cup, "I was a coward. For years, I saw what your mother was doing, how she favored Vanessa, how unfair it was to you. I saw your pain, your disappointment, but I stayed silent because I feared conflict more than I valued justice." Hearing his confession, I felt both relief and lingering sadness. His honesty was a start, but the lost years remained heavy between us. "And now," I asked quietly, "do you still feel that way?" He shook his head, slowly, thoughtfully. "No. Now I see clearly what silence has cost us all. Our home, our relationships, our family itself." "And Vanessa?" I pressed gently, despite knowing the answer might hurt. His shoulders sagged slightly. "Vanessa hasn't changed. She still sees herself as the victim, blaming everyone but herself. Gloria refuses to let her face consequences even now. They're caught in a cycle I can't break." I reached across the table, briefly touching his hand. "You can't save people from themselves, Dad. Vanessa and Mom need to want to change." He sighed deeply, understanding. "I know, but it doesn't make losing them any easier." Our relationship remained fragile, but it was honest. Daniel supported my cautious reconnection with my father, always reminding me that forgiveness was for my benefit, not theirs. Meanwhile, life continued to heal around us. Daniel and I worked hard, saving carefully, building a stable, meaningful life filled with love and respect. Occasionally, I'd run into old friends or distant relatives who expressed sympathy or admiration. Yet, no one fully understood the weight I'd carried, the betrayal, heartbreak, and the courage it took to walk away from family manipulation. One evening, almost a year after our wedding, Daniel came home with an envelope. Inside was an invitation to Aunt Darlene's 60th birthday celebration, a large family gathering we couldn't simply avoid. "Do you want to go?" Daniel asked carefully, gauging my reaction. I hesitated, a year's worth of healing, suddenly vulnerable. "Gloria and Vanessa will be there," I whispered, anxiety knotting my stomach. Daniel held my gaze, steadily. "They don't control you anymore, Rachel. You've already proven your strength. But we don't have to go if you're not ready." After several days of consideration, I finally decided. I wouldn't let fear or resentment dictate my life. We'd attend the celebration, not as victims, but as survivors. The evening of Aunt Darlene's birthday arrived. The party was at a quiet country club, elegant but understated. Walking in, Daniel's hand resting reassuringly against my back, I felt calm but wary. Immediately, eyes turned toward us. Curious, sympathetic, some openly admiring. I saw Gloria across the room, rigid and pale, pretending she hadn't noticed our arrival. Vanessa stood near her, visibly uncomfortable, barely acknowledging anyone who greeted her. My father nodded warmly, genuine happiness evident in his eyes. Throughout the evening, Daniel and I mingled comfortably, reconnecting with family members who had distanced themselves due to Gloria and Vanessa's drama. Many privately expressed respect for how we'd handled everything. The wound still felt raw, but standing confidently among those who truly cared made me realize how far we'd come. Later, as the evening quieted, I found myself face to face with my mother near the balcony doors. We stood silently for a moment, the space between us filled with years of unspoken hurt. Finally, Gloria broke the silence, her voice barely audible. "You look well, Rachel." I nodded politely, careful but composed. "I am well." She hesitated, pride visibly battling within her. I'm sorry things happened as they did. Perhaps we both made mistakes. It wasn't the apology I needed, but it was more than she'd ever given. I took a slow breath, steadying my voice. "Mom, mistakes are forgivable, but cruelty and deliberate harm aren't just mistakes." She recoiled slightly, pride flaring again briefly. "I did what I thought best for Vanessa." "Yes," I interrupted gently but firmly. "Always Vanessa. And look where it brought you." Gloria fell silent, her eyes briefly shining with tears before she quickly regained her composure. "I suppose there's nothing left to say." "No," I agreed softly. "There isn't." As I walked away, sadness lingered, but relief washed over me as well. I'd said what needed saying, without anger or bitterness, simply truth. Outside on the terrace, Daniel found me, slipping his arm warmly around my waist. "How do you feel?" "Free," I whispered, leaning into him. For the first time, truly free. We stood quietly together, looking up into the star-filled sky. I'd once believed that family meant unconditional support, but now understood family required mutual respect and trust. Gloria and Vanessa had chosen their path, one of denial and pride, and I'd chosen mine, one of honesty, courage, and dignity. At home later that night, Daniel and I sat quietly on our balcony, wrapped in a shared blanket against the cool night air. The city below shimmered softly in the moonlight. "You've come so far," Daniel whispered, gently kissing my forehead. "You're stronger than you ever knew." "I had to be," I replied quietly, turning to look deeply into his eyes. "But I didn't do it alone." He smiled softly, his voice earnest. "You never have to." In that simple truth I found peace. I'd faced unimaginable betrayal, survived relentless sabotage, and emerged stronger than ever. The revenge I'd once sought had come quietly, not through spite, but through my own resilience and happiness. I hadn't simply survived, I'd thrived. Whatever the future held, I knew one thing clearly. Love wasn't conditional. Acceptance wasn't earned through obedience, and sometimes the strongest family was the one you chose yourself. The holidays arrived once again, this time marked by warmth instead of emptiness. Daniel and I filled our apartment with simple decorations, twinkling lights and evergreen wreaths, the scent of cinnamon lingering in the air. Friends gathered around our table, sharing laughter and stories late into the night, transforming our home into exactly what I'd always dreamed of, a sanctuary built from genuine affection. Yet, as I stood quietly by our window one snowy evening, watching delicate flakes gently blanket Silvergate, thoughts of my family inevitably surfaced. There had been no contact since Aunt Darlene's party, no attempts at reconciliation beyond my father's continued, quiet effort. Vanessa and Gloria remained firmly entrenched in their bitterness, still clinging desperately to the illusion they'd chosen. "I can tell when you're thinking of them," Daniel murmured softly, slipping his arms gently around my waist. "Are you all right?" I leaned back against him, nodding slowly. "I am. It's strange. I used to feel like a part of me was missing without them, but now I feel whole." "That's because you chose your path," Daniel replied gently, his warmth grounding me. "You built your own life, one not dependent on their approval." He was right. Every decision I'd made, standing up for myself, refusing to yield, forgiving cautiously but maintaining boundaries, had led me here, to this quiet moment of true peace. As the new year began, life moved forward beautifully. My career flourished, bringing exciting opportunities, while Daniel advanced in his work, producing films that resonated with authenticity and purpose. Together, we grew stronger, our relationship deeper with each passing day. Then, one mild spring evening, Daniel came home looking unusually thoughtful. Over dinner, his eyes shone with barely contained excitement. "Rachel, there's something I've wanted to talk to you about," he began carefully, reaching across the table to hold my hand. "We've built something special here, but there's one more step I'd love for us to take." I tilted my head, curious but hopeful. "What is it?" He hesitated briefly, then smiled warmly. "I want us to start our own family, not defined by the past, but created together from love and trust. You'd make an incredible mother, Rachel." Tears blurred my vision instantly, my heart swelling with a joy I'd long denied myself. "You think so?" I whispered. He nodded, squeezing my hand tenderly. "Absolutely. And our child would know exactly what true love means. Unconditional, supportive, and free of conditions." Emotion overcame me. The family I'd always craved, the one I'd never had, was finally within reach. Not through the relatives who had raised me, but through the partner who had stood unwaveringly at my side. A few months later, I found myself staring down at 2 pink lines on a pregnancy test, heart pounding with equal parts excitement and gratitude. Daniel's face lit up joyfully when I showed him, tears of happiness filling his eyes as he embraced me. Throughout my pregnancy, occasional pangs of longing for maternal advice or a supportive sister surfaced. But each time, friends filled the void, becoming a chosen family stronger than any I'd ever known. Lily eagerly threw a baby shower filled with laughter and kindness. Aunt Darlene quietly knitted tiny sweaters, and my father, still cautious but committed, offered quiet support, determined to prove he had truly changed. The day our daughter was born, the world shifted forever. Holding her tiny form gently against my chest, her soft breaths mingling with mine, I finally understood unconditional love. Pure, fierce, limitless. Daniel sat close beside me, his eyes bright with wonder as he carefully touched her tiny fingers. "What should we name her?" he whispered gently. I smiled softly, warmth flooding my heart. "Grace," I answered without hesitation, to remind us that true strength comes from compassion, not bitterness. In Grace, Daniel and I created something precious and uniquely ours, a legacy free from old wounds and family baggage. Our little family flourished, built upon values of respect, trust, and love we deliberately chose each day. Occasionally, news from Vanessa reached me. Her marriage strained under the weight of debt, her lifestyle no longer sustainable. Gloria stubbornly clung to denial, while my father slowly rebuilt his life apart from them, learning humility through loss and redemption. Yet none of their choices defined mine. The peace I found had come at a steep price, but it was worth every painful moment, every heartbreaking betrayal I'd overcome. One quiet afternoon, as Daniel and I watched Grace toddle happily across our apartment, laughter bubbling sweetly from her tiny mouth, he squeezed my hand softly. "Rachel," looking at Grace, "I finally understand something important." I glanced at him, curiously, heart content. "What's that?" He smiled warmly, eyes filled with sincerity. "Family isn't who shares your blood. It's who chooses to stay, to love you unconditionally, to respect your boundaries and celebrate your strength." His words settled deep within me, finally healing the last, lingering pain from the past. I leaned into him, savoring the perfect, simple moment. Later that evening, as I sat quietly beside Grace's crib, watching her sleep peacefully, my phone lit up softly, displaying an unfamiliar number. Hesitantly, I answered, "Rachel." It was Vanessa's voice, subdued, uncertain. My pulse quickened, but I kept my voice steady. "Yes?" She hesitated, emotion evident beneath her pride. I'm sorry for everything. I don't expect forgiveness, but I needed to tell you." I paused carefully, absorbing the sincerity behind her shaky words. "Thank you," I finally replied gently. "But forgiveness takes time and actions." "I understand," she whispered, voice trembling. "I just wanted you to know I'm working on changing." After ending the call, I sat quietly in the darkness, processing her apology. Maybe people could change. Maybe Vanessa was sincere. But either way, her journey wasn't mine to control or carry. Stepping into our bedroom later, Daniel wrapped his arms around me gently, sensing my introspection. "Everything all right?" I nodded softly, smiling with quiet strength. "Better than ever, because I've learned something important tonight." He raised an eyebrow, curious. "What's that?" I smiled, genuine peace filling my heart. "My past doesn't define me, and my family isn't something I was born into. It's something we created." He smiled warmly, pulling me close. "Then let's keep building it." And as I leaned into him, heart finally healed and whole, I understood exactly what victory truly meant. Not revenge, not bitterness, but freedom. Freedom to choose my path, to build a future defined by love, respect, and strength. And I'd found exactly that